This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. This last week I decided to see Elemental, the latest from Pixar. After Lightyear, one of the most disposable movies of last year, I was kind of rooting for this one, at least after seeing the trailer. I was never excited about it, but I was intrigued. It looked unique, and the character design for the fire was interesting. I've also been enjoying most of Pixar's recent films. I really liked Turning Red, thought Luca was great, blah 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 blah. But I really didn't want to say this, I did not like this movie. Hear me out. Elemental is about a fire falling in love with the water. I don't know how else to describe this. But let's start with what Pixar does best, the animation. The timing is just horrible, with Across the Spider-Verse dropping just weeks before this and setting the bar ridiculously high. Pixar really had to bring it, and the animation here is, it's still pretty good. It certainly isn't Spider-Verse, but nobody was really expecting that. Let's cut it some slack. I really loved how real some of the water and glass stuff looked next to how abstract the characters were. It was a unique contrast. Again, the way they animated the fire was unexpected and interesting. I'll talk a bit about the character design in a second, but I can appreciate this unpredictable approach to doing fire. I can also recognize that the technology behind having these characters moving all of the time is pretty impressive, and that's cool, yeah? Good job, Pixar. You did a good animation. If this did anything better than most recent Pixar movies, it's the world building. This really feels like a full lived-in world. You look at certain storefronts and you're like, yeah, I believe there's entire rooms and people inside these buildings, which is a genuine accomplishment. I can't think of a ton of Pixar films outside of this and Coco that succeed with making these cities that feel properly alive and lived in. And one more thing, the music. Man, I don't know where the inspiration for this score came from, but I am loving it. Bunch of airy, chopped vocals. It felt very weird for a Pixar movie, but it really worked and was the kind of music I'd listen to out and about in my free time. I'm a big fan. Thomas Newman continues to be really good at what he does. More of this, please. But okay, aside from the character design for the fire people, I thought a lot of the film's animation lacked personality. Wade, the water guy, and his entire family was super dull to me. Aside from using their water for gags, nothing about the style ever proved that this was its own film working under its own language. Felt like just another Disney Pixar movie, which is fine. If it's just another Disney Pixar movie, it doesn't look bad. It's never going to look bad, but it does kind of feel like it's stuck in place. It's not the kind of quality I've come to expect from Pixar, you know? Luca, Turning Red, Soul, even if it was subtle, these all had unique visual styles to them that kind of pushed the studio's animation into a new direction, something we hadn't seen before. This had some stuff, but it never really got there for me. It felt only a little bit more interesting than what they were doing in Strange World, which is not a nice thing to say, I'll admit. The concept is unique, the animation is impressive, but most of the designs and presentation felt a bit rushed. Let's stop beating around the bush. They're blobs. They're just blobs. And it's hard to feel emotionally attached to a blob at a certain point. I personally just need a little bit more detail and a little bit more personality to feel interested in these characters. Usually Pixar's pretty good at making inanimate objects feel so lively. But again, they were just kind of dull. They were just dull. Bit of a nitpick incoming, but those title cards, are we serious here? They were just like 2-second title cards saying several years later in white Helvetica font over a black background. I'm gonna recreate it right now to show you just how lazy it looked. I know this seems like a nitpick, and it is in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't really affect the movie, of course, but to me, it's these smaller details that highlight the level of care that is being put into a project. And for a studio that used to inspire me to be more creative, that have a book about themselves called Creativity Inc., I'm just surprised is all that it seems like zero care went into details like this. Again, that's all a bit nitpicky, so let's just move on and talk about the story. The story here is pretty simple and nothing we haven't seen before. Girl meets boy, but wants to stay loyal to her family. It kind of has a rom-com thing about it, which I can't really think of any other Pixar movies that have a rom-com thing about them. Also, the relationship Ember had to her father did almost get a tear out of me. That was pretty cute. The romance itself, I don't know. Goes back to the blob thing and not feeling very invested in these characters, but I really didn't care for Wade. Their actions, it just don't make sense a lot of the time. Wade claiming to be such a nice guy, but unwilling to cut her some slack and not write her up at the beginning, immediately kind of an unlikable character. And then later in the film, literally 2 seconds after they embrace and touch each other, which is a big scene, Ember has a flashback and starts thinking about her family business. He says, "I'm so lucky," and it reminds her of her dad saying, "I'm so lucky." And for whatever reason, she turns on Wade immediately, and they get in this big fight, and Wade spells out the message of the scene for us and is like, "Maybe you are just afraid." Which, first of all, is really lazy dialogue. And second, I'm sitting here like, if you really loved this guy, wouldn't everything outside of this moment not matter at all to you, at least for a little bit. I mean, you're touching another element for the first time in your life, or probably the first time in the history of this town. And you're thinking about your dad. My point is that entire 2 minutes was just so poorly done, in my opinion, and it's supposed to be both the high point and the low point of the film. Even if this idea of taking your own family issues out on your loved one is a real, true feeling, this is a jarring and sort of unrealistic way of showing that, and at least to me, did little to make me believe in both the romantic connection between the two or the troubled state Ember is in. And it's just because it's rushed. Other than moments like that, there's nothing offensively bad about the story here. Let's not get all red in the face or whatever about this. Another thing I like is the ending, which don't worry, I'm not gonna spoil it, but they solve a certain thing in a really creative way. It's very sweet and has that Pixar charm to it. On paper, it seems a little ridiculous, but they pull it off in a way that, again, almost got a tear out of me. The entire story of this is that this fire woman starts this controversial romance with a water guy, and then she has to balance it with her deep-rooted connection to her father, who's a traditional fire guy. Two stories at the same time type of deal. And I think that's a good and fine idea, totally harmless, but they don't really do enough with either story to get it to a meaningful enough place. Pixar knows that if they show a cute old guy, even if he's just a flame, I might start crying, but it isn't enough to stick with me in any real way. They get halfway there with both these stories, and in the end, I guess it works, but just settling for something that works isn't the Pixar way, no. We want something that flies, that zooms, which is why I feel bad dunking on this. It isn't like offensively bad, it's just awkward and rushed. It was clearly 2 hours long, but they had to cut it down, and because of that, you can sort of tell certain scenes aren't given enough room to breathe. So in the end, I just felt like I watched an unfinished throwaway parody of a Pixar film that tried hitting all the usual beats that we've come to expect from them, and that felt frankly like a waste of time. I mean, the frickin' promo for this thing was just other Pixar movies. Like, what? While it has some nice things about it, Thomas Newman walks away innocent. As a whole, I really didn't like this movie. It was super bland, super awkward, and a bit lazy for Pixar, and at this rate, I really hope we get something good pretty soon here. Okay, also, they did bring back the short film before the feature, which made me super happy, but it was a bad one. It was like a Carl and Doug thing from Up that was trying to milk the Ellie story again, same score and everything, and while it was a cute idea in theory, it was a really bland short film, and I was so disappointed. Geez, this is a negative video. To balance that out, here's a recommendation. If you somehow haven't already, go watch Across the Spider-Verse, but also Past Lives is in theaters, and it is so far the best movie of the year, so go check it out. Whew. Anyway, Jesus Christ. Thanks for watching. Go watch Elemental and form your own opinion, and before you head out, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Squarespace, the best place to go to build a website and make that idea of yours happen. They have a thing called Fluid Engine, a next-generation website design system that allows you to customize every design detail with reimagined drag-and-drop technology for desktop or mobile. If you're like me and you're an aspiring filmmaker, it's a really good idea to put together a portfolio, and Squarespace has all the best tools to make it look amazing. With their video collection feature, you can host video content, organize your video library, and showcase your content on beautiful video pages and sell access to your videos with member areas. It's super helpful. And to make the entire process just that much easier, they have an asset library where you can upload, organize, and access all your content from one place. With the new asset library, you're able to manage all your files from one central hub and use them across the Squarespace platform. Go to squarespace.com to start your free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Karsten to get 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain.